Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. Welcome to Jibber. My name is Skajarmos, otherwise known as Toneshift, and I, as always, shall be your host. With me today, we have Tom117Z, the author of Change and Soaring on Little Wings, and co-author on several Idiosyverse stories.
Hello.
We have Blank Page, the author of Human Nature, Their Very Own Sons, and all in all kind of a lovable dork.
Hey. Thanks, mate.
And of course, we also have Paladin57, who's just kind of also here. That introduction would normally go to Hades, but he's not here today, which is mildly disheartening. But you know what? Oh well.
Yeah, I'm disappointed as well, but what can you do?
Yeah.
Life happens.
Anyway.
So,
Hello,
how has everyone's
life happens.
so how's everyone's week been, eh?
Oh, you already know
Frustrating.
the answer.
Busy as usual.
We'll get to blanks last because that's actually a topic for today.
On its own.
Yeah. So, Tom, how was your week? Well said, Paladin.
Not too bad.
My week's
Well
been,
hummed.
and my week's been pretty good. I've been working on Little Consequences because that thing's finally been unveiled to the public. I am pleased by this. And I suppose with that rather minimalistic introduction, it's time we got on to our first topic, which is Blank Page's shitty weekend.
All right, kiddies, gather around. Uncle Blank's got a story for you. So,
Can't
for
wait.
anyone...
Hold on to your butts.
Oh, boy. So, for anyone like outside of this little group who's going to be listening who doesn't know, I'm actually in the Air National Guard. And this, which is like, I work one weekend out of the month as a traditional status person. And this weekend, it was the super drill, which is like a 4-day weekend as opposed to the normal 2. So I got 4 days of fun-filled activities to talk about.
Oh boy. Gather around,
So
kids. I get the feeling we already know what today's episode title is going to be. Let's discuss
boy.
Blank's shitty weekend.
So on day 1, after sitting through like 2 briefings back to back and having to take the a piss test, for lack of better terms, that took an hour and a half because everyone went at the same time. I went upstairs to get to work on everything. I had to check my emails, have to make sure I'm all green on all the things I got to do, I'm responsible for. And I have an ID card that everyone has that's all standard issue that you use to sign into computers and do practically anything. Well, I didn't realize that the numpad wasn't locked the first couple tries, so I put my password in wrong twice in a row. And then when I realized it and typed in a third time, I mistyped and got my entire card locked. So that put me behind today because I couldn't unlock it until Friday because the office full of people responsible for handling stuff like that was closed for training. So I wasn't at a complete loss though, because I knew I had to talk to the unit training manager who's in charge of making sure everyone's good for the tests to be eligible.
Tom, what the fuck is that sound?
What was what sound? I was just sitting here listening.
Well, for some reason your microphone exploded and now my ears are bleeding.
Oh, you'll save
no,
from this at least.
I didn't mute it or do anything. I was literally just sitting here silently listening.
Well, all of a sudden a bunch of noise flared up, so maybe it came a little loose. You should check your plugs. Ow!
Sounds like static.
Dude,
It
that
was
sounds a little-
obnoxiously loud static.
Well,
Ow!
he doesn't like me recently, so yeah.
Ow! Ow!
That's the con of wearing headphones.
Oh, there it is again.
Ow!
Remember, children, just go with the mic.
Hold on. Let me check. I'm gonna mute myself. I'll check my connections.
Okay. Blank, you may resume now.
All right, where was I? Okay, so there's this test I got to take to make me eligible to promote to, well, the next rank. And in order to do it, I got to study this little guide fill out a practice test, hand it to my supervisor, and he sends it to the training manager in charge of coordinating stuff like that. So, like, I don't need a computer to do that. So on Thursday, I decided to go across to meet the guy, and I say, hey, my name is Airman so-and-so, and I'm here to get ready for my test tomorrow. And he looks at me, like, looks at my name, is like, dude, I don't have anything on you. Like, what? So it turns out my supervisor did not send the little practice test to him, which is like one of the 2 things required for him to set everything up. And he didn't have a single thing about me in his folder, so we didn't even have like the letter that came with it either. So I went to go find my supervisor, who wasn't there that day, for the bubble sheet. So everyone is doing something this day and like being productive, and I'm just sitting here by myself twiddling my thumbs because there was nothing I can do. And that was day 1.
Bureaucracy strikes again.
Well, all my connections seem all my connections are perfectly fine. I don't know what's going on.
Clearly something is wrong.
This is giving me some joy, though.
Anyway, that kind of reminds me of, like, when I got transferred from sanitation to production, which is second shift production is on the other side of the building I work at.
Mm-hmm.
And we have, you swipe your card, you can go through.
Yeah.
Well, mine wasn't registered on that side, so.
Ooh, yeah. I've had stuff like that happen before.
Which first day I did, I had to go back over to the other side to get my stuff because they just basically came and get me during, work, on sanitation, like, hey, you're going to production. So they took me across inside the building. And when I go my half hour to get my stuff, I went outside and went around and get my stuff. When I go back in, trying to get in, well, having trouble. The quartermaster comes like, hey, are you supposed to be over here? It's like, yes. Why haven't I seen you? And then one of the people that I knew from that works there, who came from the same job I came from, it's like, yeah, he got transferred over here and I'm through. It's like, all right. And it took a couple days to get the key card on that side to work, so.
Oh, man.
Yes.
Don't you just hate it when bureaucracy wrecks shit? Yeah.
Man, it's just like, if anything else, it's like overcomplicating a set of rules that could, like, we're too embedded in the use of technology when, like, a simple handing a piece of paper to someone would be so much faster.
Right?
It also doesn't help that, contrary to popular belief, the military has crummy computer systems. Like, it's also
I
slow.
am very happy to hear this.
I mean,
very
it's the work
happy.
done, but it's also just so slow and infuriating to work with sometimes.
I am very happy to hear this.
That is surprising. You think, you're supposed to be well-trained and have the state-of-the-art technology, and yet you have crummy computers.
You have the highest frickin' budget out of everything in our country, and you get crummy computers. That says more than it should. Anyways, carry on with your shitty weekend.
All right, so day 2, Friday.
Before you continue, is this better?
A
Yes,
little.
much better.
For now, it seems to just kind of spike at random, so we'll see.
Yeah, well, I unplugged it, replugged it, and also turned noise suppression on because all my new drivers are just installed. So.
All right.
Oh yeah, that's one of the things that happened to you, ain't it?
Yeah, that's a topic for later. For now, back to your shitty weekend. Friday we're on, was it?
Yeah, Friday. So I need to get my card fixed ASAP. But so I sit through roll call, the nice 30 minutes that is, because everyone has a talking point. And right as I'm about to get up to leave, one of the captains, I think, walks in and says, "Hey, since I got all you guys here, let's go through this briefing right now." And I just like slowly step back down, like, okay, let's just get this over with. Wound up being another hour about like unit safety, pretty much, because people are dumb and not drinking water in 100-degree weather.
That is pretty dumb.
Mm-hmm. So I make it across the base to headquarters in the 90-degree weather with 90% humidity, which sucks. And I sit down for like an hour and a half waiting in line because the office is absolutely packed because other people had similar problems. And this took forever for me to do, like sit down for 8 minutes, get my new card given to me, and then I was able to bounce. At the same time, when I get back, I see my supervisor who had my bubble sheet, and he looks me straight in the eye and says, insert name here, how do you make 90% on an open book test? And I'm trying really hard right now to not say, why the hell have you not said anything about this sooner? Because for 2 months now, I've been studying a 90% correct study sheet, which peeved me to no end. Because he had this thing for a while, so he either knew this whole time that I had 90% and didn't tell me, or he didn't grade it like he said he did until just that morning. And I honestly don't know which one I expect more. But I eventually turned everything on Friday. And like there were 2 dates to do this test too, by the way, during the weekend. There was Friday or Sunday. And the day before he said, okay, if depending on how early you get it to me the next day, I might be able to fit you in Friday, but you should be prepared to do it Sunday anyways. So I said, okay, I'll just do it as fast as I can. Well, I turn it in and it's kind of too late. There's a chance you can squeeze it in, but considering I've been like the best I can do right now is 90%, I said, just hold off until Sunday. And he said, well, turns out Sunday's full.
Oh.
So now I have to come in on one of my off days to take the test. I don't know how long the test is, how long it's going to take, but the fact I have to drive 45 minutes to somewhere for something that could have been handled a lot sooner is a little infuriating.
Oh.
And the rest of that day was just me catching up with everything from the first day that I didn't get around to doing. And even then, that was really hard because there were a lot of hour-long briefings peppered around the day. And you know how fun that stuff is.
Yeah.
On day 3, this day was actually... So there was a change of command going on where a new colonel was taken over for my little squadron, wing, whatever. And I made the mistake of volunteering to help with that.
Uh-oh.
But all things considered, it wasn't a bad day. We had the little dry run beforehand, and all I had to do was sit down at a computer, hit play for the national anthem, and hit play for the Air Force song. You know, not that hard.
Did something
So-
break?
No, but I did have a good scare halfway through it. But thank you for reminding me too, because I would have not even said anything about that. So day 3 starts, sit through another hour briefing, go over back to headquarters because my card that I just got unlocked is actually about to expire in August. So I figured, hey, I might as well fix that anyways. It takes another hour, but get this, I was the second person in line, and like 30 minutes into it, the guy who's like at the desk is like, oh man, I'm multitasking so well right now. And I'm like thinking in my mind, yeah, you're multitasking real well, getting all the people who are behind me instead of me. And finally get that done, go over to medical to get my blood drawn for an HIV test, because that's just a standard thing you have to do. And I'm deathly afraid of needles and like getting my blood drawn. So the guy like jokingly asked, oh man, are you gonna pass out? I was like, oh man, I don't think so. So my entire game plan was just like look up to the ceiling, like off to the side, away from the needle, as best as I can. And he goes ahead and does it, and like it's not as bad as I think. I'm like, okay, yeah, I got this. I look over to the side once he's done, and I see like 2 vials of blood, and it just clicks in my head, like, wait a second. So I'm just sitting there a bit, and I feel like this little numbing sensation in the back of my head, like right at the base of the neck, like, okay, no, I'm good. I'm just perfectly fine. Next thing I know, everything's a little fuzzy in front of me, and I'm coming back into consciousness on the floor. Someone's holding my feet, got a little ice pack on the back of my neck. Someone's asking me questions like, what's my date of birth? Where do I live? What's my social? I'm like, oh, hey guys, what'd I miss?
The
But-
funny thing is, I used to give blood for the Red Cross,
Yeah,
and I've never been afraid of the needle.
man, I wish I was like you. But that was arguably the best thing that happened all weekend, because when I finally woke up, I had never felt so relaxed in my entire life. I felt like I just slept for an entire day just laying there on the cold tile.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't be surprised what cold tile can do to you.
Oh man, it's a heavenly drug. So I go to the ceremony, and everyone's eventually flooding in and all. I got like a can of Monster and a can of Mountain Dew next to me, so I am full on alert as a hawk for this. And I'm jotting down notes in the little pamphlet as everyone's coming in, making sure like I annotate these 2 places where I'm supposed to hit play, so I do not by any chance at all fuck this up, because there's gonna be like generals here, like chief master sergeants, which is like the highest enlisted rank you can get to. And as I'm jotting it down, I feel like this hand like clapped down on my shoulder, and I give it a little friendly shake, like, "Hey man, you taking notes?" Like, "Oh yeah, sir. There's no way I'm gonna mess this up at all." It's like, "Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, I pressed play once and I pressed play again." You know, so you don't know like what's your job. And I look up and I see 2 stars on this guy's collar. I'm like, "Oh," I straightened right up. "Oh yes, sir. I'm a insert job title here and all that stuff." And man, my heart leapt out of my chest. I'm not gonna lie. He had
like,
way
oh
more
shit!
rank than I did.
It's like, oh shit! I'm being super casual with someone who could axe me if he wanted. Oh no!
Man, I go through the whole thing with one single hiccup. So as we were standing for like you got to call attention to orders at one point, which is like you stand up, stock still, and as someone's reading out the actual formal command, that's hand something off. And while I was standing up, the computer screen locked.
Oh.
I was like, oh! So I went, the moment we were able to sit back down, I shut down and unlocked it just in time to play the Air Force song. I was, so proud of myself. Didn't screw up that day. And the rest of the day I got caught up with everything else, and I was absolutely done. And then Sunday came. The day was perfectly fine. It's just the morning I'm a little irked with, but I laughed about it a little bit because it was just the icing on the cake. It was the first time I ever got pulled over. So there was a slow traffic light. Me and a cop pulled up next to in the both lanes. Like we were the only ones on the road, and I'm like practically parked next to a cop. I don't want to like floor it, so I just jump ahead of them because I don't want them to get any bad vibes off me. So I figured I'm just gonna slowly accelerate, but they accelerate at just the same slow pace as me. So this is already awkward. We're like side by side, and I'm, oh my goodness, I gotta get out of this. And we're like both going the speed limit, but I'm in the fast lane. But I don't want to speed next to the cop, so I just go like, I push 5 miles ahead, like 5 more miles an hour into my. So I'm like slowly inching on across, and then there's this bend, and I don't know if you guys have ever like played track, or if you like understand why they stagger the starting positions for a bunch of runners. Like if you're on the inside lane, and if you're going the exact same pace as someone else, by the time the curve ends, you'll be ahead of him, make it look like you ran faster. And there's this bend in the road, a really big one, and the cop was on the inside lane. And while I was like going 5 miles per hour faster than her, she was able to slowly inch further ahead of me. And so we got to the very end, in which case I started slowly inch ahead of her. And next thing I know, she's like kind of like slows down and swerves pretty quickly behind me. I'm like, oh man, that's a pretty aggressive turn. I hope there's nothing wee woo, lights are flashing and everything. I'm like, what did I do? So I go ahead and turn over, and she comes up, license registration, all that fun jazz, and tells me I was impeding traffic. Traffic, I should also add, as in the one car a quarter mile behind us in her lane. But I say, okay, yes, ma'am. I went ahead and handed it all to her. And she goes to her car, comes back, and like almost immediately, I don't know if it's because of the fact I was in uniform or the fact I was being polite to her, but her tone really softened after that. But she like gave me a warning and all that stuff because my record is sparkly clean up until this point. And I look at it, and she like explains to me that in the state of Arkansas, it is illegal to be in the left lane of traffic unless you are about to turn or unless you're trying to pass someone.
Oh.
which was news to me because that's like one of those not uncommon. It's one of those less well-known rules that nobody knows about because you see it happen everywhere. So, oh my goodness. Yeah, even that was like, actually, that's what it said on the warning too. Continuously driving in the left lane. So hey, if anybody out there plans on driving to Arkansas, stay in the right lane. I guess. Oh my god.
And
But hey, that was my weekend.
that's on my weekend.
Thank
When
you
that was
for
yours.
listening to my grievances.
Very, very nice. So that was entertaining to listen to. This next topic is also going to involve you, Blank.
Oh boy.
Oh god.
And it's going to involve
This one
Paladin.
I'm curious about.
Oh yeah. I just looked at it again. I'm so excited, Paladin.
Oh shit, the
Buddy,
text is
I've
too
seen
large.
this
I gotta.
topics list.
Oh yeah. So who want? So
Uh,
you want me to start, or do you want me to start blank?
Oh, you should talk about the time that Hades first saw you first.
Oh
Unless we
yeah.
talked about that last
Well,
time.
Yes.
Good
When
job.
Hades first, saw my face, like, oh God, what is that?
But this guy
Really?
apparently has been like getting to see everyone through a little camera.
When did Hades see your face?
We-
Some point.
Me and Hades did. Well, I did a video chat. Of course, he didn't turn. I don't think he has a camera on his side. I'm not completely sure, but
Oh,
anyway, I let him see my face, and then after that, I think. Well, when was it? A Monday when I did it with Blank? I think.
yeah,
it
that
was-
sounds about right.
Yeah.
Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, no, I saw Blank. I was expecting, black guy in the end because your deep voice.
Which isn't the first time I've been told that, to be honest.
Instead, I see a skinny white guy with a beard and hair.
Why,
Nice
this
hair.
kid, you know.
Yeah, so.
Man, it's just the way he said it too. It's like, oh wait, that's what you look like? I thought you were black. Dude, I just lost it.
Yes. That deep voice just puts in misconceptions.
Oh my gosh, I've been told so many things about my voice. Like I've been told I should be everything from like a radio broadcaster to like one of those like porn hotlines where you just call someone on the phone. I literally been told that by a sergeant. He was taking that out of me.
That's a weird thing to have your sergeant tell you. Hey, you should totally
I
go on the
know.
phone and make people come.
No, he said like I sound like I do that for a living, but
Well then,
I didn't know if I should be flattered or a little concerned.
yes. Just yes.
He was in
yes.
the military.
Just
Oh.
go with yes. That's the only appropriate response to that.
Oh man,
Oh my god. Okay.
I love my job.
Uh,
I hate it, but I love it.
well,
So, okay. So that
well,
was a
Brian never knew what my face. Then Brian never knew what my face looked like until I sent him a picture of myself in a psychopathic murderous surgeon costume.
Yeah. That was
Halloween.
Anyways, I honestly don't remember what your face looks like because that's the only time I've seen your face that I can remember. You don't show it to
It
me very
looks
much.
beautiful dash ugly. Citation needed.
I will take your word for it. Now, onwards to the next topic. Tom, this one's actually for you. I don't. Go ahead. Recount the story of how your hard drive died.
Well, you've experienced my computer troubles today on this very jibber jabber.
Oh, yes.
Some symptoms of it, anyway.
Yeah.
That was pretty spot on, let me tell you.
So,
Oh, my God.
ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to start this story, we must travel back in time a full month. Well,
Full month! So ancient!
Man, it feels like it
a month
sometimes.
ago, like I've told you guys like a few times, I've had to not update some of my stories on a weekend because I've been away camping and barping and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, the first time I did this, oh no, second time, sorry. Second time I did this, which was last month, I turned my computer off in my university dorm. Like, it'd been running completely fine, as it had for the last, well, 4 years coming on.
Oh geez, that's an old computer.
Barring a few. Yeah, barring I replaced motherboard and processor.
Mhm.
Well, not really replaced, upgraded, just so I could run better games and VR. But anyway, yeah, it'd been working fine, shut down fine. I left it for a couple of days the weekend, came back on the Sunday, turned it on, and well, first thing I noticed, it wants me to do a disk check. They want to check the hard drive for errors and whatnot. So I thought, okay, that's probably just a odd thing to happen, but it probably isn't too bad. It does the disk check. It then, for that entire night, is constantly freezing. I'm like hanging. I can't get the computer to work properly until I finally managed to get it to boot into safe mode, then shut it down and boot normally, and then it worked fine. And for the next month, it works almost completely fine, with the exception of it having constant disk checks every now and then whenever I try and boot it up. And then, this lovely, lovely Friday, like the night before, just almost reminiscent of that time I went away for the weekend, I turned it off, everything had been working fine all day, didn't even have a disk check that day. Then Friday morning, I booted up, and oh fuck my life, it's basically dead. Like, the stuttering and hanging comes back worse than before. I can't get it to do anything, like, Discord and Skype won't even load. Like, they're two things that automatically load. I shut it down, I force it to do a disk check. That gets to run better, but it doesn't work for long before it starts crashing. I blue screen. I tried to run it in safe mode of networking. It just kind of, the screen distorts and then it crashes. I tried to run it in normal safe mode without networking. Same result, I can't run it in safe mode at all. It's at this point I decide to research these symptoms on the internet, on my phone. And the first thing I find, have you been getting constant disk checks? Have you been getting constant freezing and stirring? Have you been getting blue screens of death? Yes and yes and yes. Is your hard drive 3 or 4 years old? Yes. Your hard drive's fucked. Wonderful.
Wonderful.
And it's at this point I realize, oh shit, all my computers, all my fanfiction files, all the plans for said fix, including ones I haven't started yet, and ones I'm currently doing, like all of Fallout and Equestria, the rest of Soaring and Little Wings, all of other stuff, like the future changes and whatnot. All those, all my notes and whatnot are all on this computer. I don't have them I stupidly don't have them backed up. So if this hard drive fully dies, then I've lost all of it.
Oh.
I have to start from scratch.
Oh.
Like, that includes all my cover-ups. So at this point, I'm panicking. I'm shitting myself. I know my hard drive's dying. And I don't know how long it's going to last because it's worse than ever. Like, it's on its complete last legs. So at this point, I'm saying what's happening in the Discord chat and giving all updates. I force it into another disk check. I boot it up. I don't bother going on the internet because that would probably just make it stutter more if I'm trying to do that. I shut down I shut down Skype, Discord. I don't even allow them to even start. It seems to be running at this point kind of alright. It's not really stuttering. So I load the first thing I do is I get my fanfiction files, copy them all over to my memory stick. I go through all my videos, all my pictures, all of that stuff. It's during this time that my computer just goes completely blank. A complete black screen. I try to restart it, it's just black still. So at this point, I'm certain my hard drive's dead and I'm not going to get anything more. I leave it a couple hours, then I try again just to be sure. I managed to get it does another disk check, and I managed to get it to boot again, which allows me to get a few more of my files, just mostly some installers and a few of my games that I don't have on Steam and whatnot. So I managed to get pretty much everything I want, and then it obviously dies again, and that's it. It's dead. It's a potato.
Oof.
Sounds like
so
a rough day.
luckily though, Amazon does a 1-day delivery, and bought a terabyte hard drive, which I installed yesterday. I've transferred everything on my memory stick I managed to save over, which I've now sorted out. So I have all my fix, everything's good. And now I have the arduous process of reinstalling every other fucking piece of software I have on my previous hard drive, which is, well, a lot. Like a good 1,000 gigabytes of shit.
Well, you have our
I've barely even
sympathies.
begun. Yep. Like, I've got all my Steam games, I've got Unity and Visual Studio. It's a nightmare. All my drivers, which is why my audio is temperamental.
Hmm.
And I want someone to kill me.
No, you don't.
And then,
No,
No,
you
you
do
don't.
not.
hey, what
Kill
you
me in
need to do
spirit, at least then I
is-
don't physically die.
Hey, just you need to go to some sort of doctor, draw some blood, pass out on the floor, and trust me, it's the most euphoric feeling ever. It's like so much better instantly.
God.
Stress
Yeah,
is
now-
gone.
Now I've just got a dead hard drive on my desk, and it's all very frustrating. I didn't manage to update anything this week because of it.
Hmm.
So,
Well, what can you
no
do?
soaring on little wings for you, Brian.
That's okay.
You have to wait
that's,
some more.
That's okay. I didn't record any of it yesterday either.
Oof.
Actually,
Yes, you silly filly.
I completely forgot that yesterday was Saturday and not Friday.
It's always a Saturday, Brian. It's always on a Saturday. You should know this.
Yes, the Indie has taught us that well. We're the ones who made that fucking rule.
Yes. Yes. we
Speaking
are.
of shit
Well,
that we
technically-
have made, speaking of shit that we have made, I think it's time that we moved on to the last topic that we had lined up for today, which is.
Well, we have half an hour still.
Time to stretch it out.
I mean, this is kind of
Actually, it's technically a three-parter.
this is kind of an intricate topic anyway, so I imagine we could probably make it work for a full 30 minutes. The topic in question, if I can just get it centered, there we go, is blank. Tom and I have all written fan fictions featuring alternate universes of some description. With Tom, it was the most specific one, obviously, in the back of my head is the Change series, and I don't think we could really count.
Magnum opus.
Yeah, so his magnum opus Change is an alternate universe series. Blank Page has also written an alternate universe story, although still work in progress, in the form of Their Very Own Sons. And of course, I have Little Glimpses and its sequels that I've written, which are also an alternate universe story. And a lot of alternate universe stories, I just kind of feel like that it's an interesting thing to think about, because one of the panels I went at Everfree Northwest actually talked about the setting of alternate universe stories. And I don't know, I just kind of felt like that was an interesting topic, so I felt like it wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea, since we've all written stories that feature an alternate universe of some description, to talk about our thought processes as we were going into it. So why don't we start with Tom?
Can I interrupt you just for a second, Brian?
Sure.
You know that OC I sent you for the thumbnails?
Yes.
He's meant to be a unicorn.
Whoops.
Oof.
Whoops. We can fix that
I think
later.
that-
Hey, just like
I
go,
might have
go
had
to
my-
Microsoft Paint and just
No.
subtly color in like a red
I-
horn
I-
or something. Please, I'll pay you money.
I think I've had a horrible accident. Under there, under that mane, I look like Timber Shadow.
Sure.
Oh god.
Oh.
But yeah, why don't we...
I'll fix that after Jibber Jabber.
So why don't we start with you, actually, Tom, since I think most of the people watching this video are going to be more familiar with Change than the other stories that we'll be talking about. So,
Well, you've done a fuck ton of episodes and still are.
Oh yeah, I've got months to go before I'm done with Queen of the Hive. Like, I'm thinking that after I
I
finish my
still need to
reading,
catch up on that reading.
I'm thinking that once I finish my reading of Little Glimpses, I'll just devote also the Thursday and Friday slot to Queen of the Hive, so I can get that thing done quicker.
By the time you've done Queen of the Hive, Change Avia will probably be done.
Oh
'cause
yeah,
It's a short story.
yeah, I will.
Yep.
Anyway,
Oh, did you see the cover art by Brian for that?
yes, I did, and I did not at first realize that was the cover art until you showed me it again with the cover and with the title. Oh, that's what that was.
Yes. Did you not notice the little Avia?
I did.
Right in the center.
I thought that was a tiny Twilight.
There's a lack of a pig stripe plus bug wings.
I wasn't paying attention. I was more
Clearly.
I was more focused on the Lyra smiling creepily into the camera. but I can't but I can't show any of this to the YouTube audience. So let's just move on. What was some of your thought processes when you were working on Change when you first started it? How did you?
Well,
Especially once it
when
sort
I
of
first
ballooned
started
up.
it, I was still
Go ahead.
Well, I'll start at the very beginning. When I first started Change, I was a scrub lord at writing. I
We were all there.
was making, like, the only fics I'd written so far were Doctor Who's Born into Darkness, which is shit. The only reason I kept it and not deleted it is because it's my first story, and I'm a sentimental idiot.
Ooh, that's a good idea for a topic for some time. Our first stories.
It was utter junk, but yeah.
We can
Then I've
talk about
got
that next week.
the other story before that was Mare of the Moon, which is 12 chapters. I honestly not particularly fond of it because it was still early days. Though for some reason it kind of was my first story to get featured, and people seem to really like it. I'm not entirely sure why, but that's beside the point and topic for an else time. There was also a couple other stories I started at some point which we don't talk about. They're in the vault of deletion. But yeah, and then I started Change, which, like, I knew I wanted to do a Changeling Twilight story by this point because bugs and Twilight best thing. When I was initially planning it, I did not intend for it to go as big as it was. Like, Crudelis didn't exist. There was no like Changeling Council. There was no bigger story arc. There's certainly no freaking Empress or any of that crap. Basically, it was just going to be 12 or so chapters, same length as Mare of the Moon. It was going to originally, Broadsword was going to be just a complete dick bag all throughout. That in the initial concept. Blue Blood was going to have a role at some point. I can't remember in what form. I just wanted to. Yeah, probably, but yeah, and basically the ending of Act 1 was going to be just the ending. And that was just at first I didn't really put much thought into it at first because it was getting still early days and I was a scrub, but I just kind of had an idea and I wanted to roll with it. So I released the first chapter, well, the prologue rather. Actually, I think it was the prologue and the first chapter released at the same time, but anyway, and pretty much on the first day it got top spot on the featured page. Like, it was number 1. It got over 1,000 views. It had the hot right now symbol. It was featured. Oh, I said it was featured, and people were like freaking just like, oh yes, I want to see more of this. This looks like it's going to be awesome. It's like, oh, suddenly I feel a lot of pressure.
Oh my goodness, I remember feeling that one time.
Yeah. So back to the drawing board I went. I looked over what I did. 12 chapters. I cut Blue Blood's part completely. I decided to make Broadsword or increase the plot, so I made the whole thing about Queen Vespula's hive kind of being in the shadows. The broadsword we see being an infiltrator disguised as broadsword. And from there, I just kind of thought what the rest of the changing civilization would like. Like, that's I kind of thought of the council, like other changing hives, what that kind of landscape would be like, how they would feel about Equestria, how they would differ, like Chrysalis's personal history, who her mother was, like what relations to the hive, and Equestria's own past they had. And that eventually led to Crudelis, and that whole sack of shit.
She was indeed that.
And that also, yeah. So, so by this point, the projected chapter length had already increased to at least 30, and then more as I thought of what to do with Crudelis beyond Serpens' death. So that eventually became what it is. You can kind of see the point of my initial kind of floundering to where I kind of more solidified and knew what I was doing, because all of Act 1 kind of fluctuates between 1,000 and 2,000 words in a chapter. Well, Act 2 onwards is uniform 2,000 at least.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been my rule ever since for stories.
Yeah.
With the exception of one chapter in Act 2, but that was because I was lazy that day. Off. But yeah, and it was as I was working on Act 2 at the beginning of is when I started. Like I'd already been thinking about like the changing civilizations. Like I knew like who Chris's mother was, who Crudelis and the old, not the old Avia's mother was. Like I've forgotten her name now, Imperatrix or something. But no,
Yeah, it was Imperatrix.
Yeah, Imperatrix. So I knew that whole thing, but then I was also around this time I started thinking about maybe where this council was around the time of say the Hearthwarming event, the formation of Equestria, why the changelings are so recluse as they are, and as I've been mentioning throughout Act 2, declining as they are. Enter Empress Immortalis. So I then came up with the whole idea during the earliest days of the three tribes, that the changelings were a lot more powerful. And that something obviously happened to, stop that, and that came down to the Empress and her legend, which then got mentioned by Chrysalis during one of the chapters, and then kind of became a plot point with Crudelis' whole plan, as foolish and stupid as she was.
Yep.
Yeah, her being stupid, she ended up killing Chrysalis.
Well, it's not that. It's just that if she put that regalia on, you saw what happened to Draco.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have gone well.
Total enslavement.
Whoops.
Yeah, so by this point, I have like a whole backstory history. Like, for example, Immortalis, when she came out of the whole thing, she was surprised to see the sun and moon being controlled now, because back in her time, they had a natural orbit.
Yeah.
She was also surprised at the existence of Alicorn. She thought they were myths and like modern technologies and whatnot, but she got filled into the hive mind pretty quickly.
Yep.
Advantages of having a joint mind. And then a slight insight into future plans. Like this was back all the way when I was doing the End of Change and the beginnings of Queen of the Hive. I also thinking about the Undiscovered West, which in my head canon is the original land of the ponies and where they came from before the whole Wendigo thing. So, as a side thing, I started thinking, like, in this storyline, how would the rest of the world have affected that, and what's there now? And I'm not going to say anything else, because that'll be spoilers.
For the final story in the series, yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So basically, it just stopped from me just blagging it to thinking a lot about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's definitely interesting. What about you, Blank, with their very own sons?
Well, it's a shame that Tangy ain't here, because I gotta give part of the credit to her. Like, her story, like, a tangent of thinking about it. I saw it in the feature box one time. I was like, oh, hey, that's a pretty cool idea. And that was kind of the baseline, like, thinking more about that alternate universe involving Nightmare Moon. And I also gotta give part of the credit to our good friend Skajarmas here for not believing in me whatsoever. Thank you for your encouragement when I first brought it on to you. So I was having a nice little spell of insomnia, and in my insomnia and sleep drug induced state while I was playing Dark Souls, it all finally clicks in my head. Hey, what if this one guy who's like all about praising the sun, all that fun jazz, and following that stuff and making his own practically a cult, ran into the world controlled by like practically an evil demon of darkness
With no sunlight for years.
Yeah, and I wound up trying to play off how far I can go with it, thinking about where I could start it off with. Wound up doing it season, years, whatever, to be all caught up with everything. And that was actually probably the most fun I've ever had because I got to think about where all the characters may have been. I got to see a bit of a window from that episode, watching it like 3 times over, trying to think of what happened. Because Rainbow seemed to be somewhat military in the different timelines with Shaman taking over and Nightmare Moon.
Yep. She had a prosthetic wing.
Yeah, she did. I'm real curious on how that might have happened, but I'm planning, if there is ever a chance I do a sequel, to integrate that into it.
I mean, that would involve having Rainbow Dash's wing being torn off, which would probably require you bumping it up to a teen rating.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, because of another scene that there's no way that plain out murder is going to be E for everyone. That's going to be a little tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that also, I always kind of had a small complaint that Nightmare was never really used well enough. Like, just being like a single one-time villain. Always thought she'd be so much cooler to be, have a bit more depth to her, as opposed to, I just like the Knight. So, figured I'd go with that too.
To be fair, a lot of her depth is also derived from Luna, because they are the same person, just different sides of the same coin, more or less. It's like falling to the dark side.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Nightmare Entity comics thing pisses me off to no end.
That's why
I'm glad there's separate universes.
Yep.
No, I guess it's kind of the same thing as, like, say Anakin and Vader. Like, we've seen all of Anakin's story, but I'm really hoping that we get a Darth Vader standalone, like what we've gotten for Solo and Rogue One.
Yeah, that
Thing was she was Luna's thing was that she was more for like a good decade. Like we had recently 100th anniversary, like 1,000.
The one's versary it was called 1,111th year of Celestia raising the sun, which means before Luna's banishment they'd been in power for at least 111 years.
Yes. So assume like for the first decade or so everything was fine with princesses because they defeated Discord, they got the crown, the new Christian government was formed after Platinum, was no longer a thing.
I probably gotta watch that episode.
So so everything was fine, but then say like everyone starts watching Celestia as a god and starts shunning Luna, and obviously no one goes to her court. No one even wants to associate with her. Like Celestia doesn't notice because she's too blinded by her own light. So say like a century of just pure isolation and loneliness, and that's
going to generate
growing resentment.
Yeah, that's
Luna.
Resentment, jealousy.
Yeah. And her whole thing of wanting
Nightmare
everyone to love the Knight.
Yeah.
Well, she was going towards Nightmare and then kind of when she finally just kind of snapped into insanity. Like the whole thing of wanting the Knight to last forever is just to kind of force people to love the Knight and in turn force people to love her, even though she was kind of screwing herself in the process. But
yeah,
she wasn't exactly in the same mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah,
I'm definitely gonna have to watch that episode so I can get a bit more context. Because
I mean, that's kind of lore sprinkled all over the show, though, is what we just recited.
Yeah. She just wanted people to give a shit, which is why when she returned, the elements depowered her. She was basically reduced to a teen or whatever, more Cadence's age, actually given her size during the episode. Completely defenseless, no magic. She probably thought she was about to get blasted, and then Celestia decided to reconcile. She's like, oh, well, maybe I should give this a go, because that's what I've wanted the entire damn time.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then we get Gilred and Luna and Tantabus and
some of my favorite characterization in the show.
To be honest, remember some stories they're like, instead of being reduced, having her power reduced and whatnot, they end up permanently losing a chunk of her own power for ever.
She didn't lose it. She gained it back by the time of season 2. We didn't see her for the rest of the season.
Yeah. And
actually, that still throws me through a loop. Like, the jump between little blue girl to the big towering, almost equal in size that we got now.
I mean, from what I can tell is from my headcanon on that is the elements booted Luna down to a younger state of mind, a more friendly and innocent state of mind so that she could reconcile things with Celestia and build herself back up properly. And that took maybe like about a year, during which she had accelerated growth until she was back to where she was around the time she showed up for Nightmare Night in season 2. That's kind of how I perceive it.
And she can kind of shift into her nightmare form whenever she wants. That's kind of
illusions
shown
at
very
any
briefly.
yeah, illusions at any rate.
Yeah.
Oh shoot! Does that mean like the one that we see now is just an illusion? She's actually just half that size. No,
I'm not.
No,
no. I'm also of the personal headcanon now that ever since that lunar eclipse, whenever it comes Nightmare Night, Luna just shifts into Nightmare Moon, just physically, just for the night.
Just to have fun.
Yes.
Anyways,
You know,
it is scare the shit out of people.
now.
Anyways, that now. Anything else about your thought process when working on their very own Sons Blank? Because I still got to talk about flashes, and we've got 9 minutes left.
You go ahead, man. I can't add too much more.
All right, fair enough. For little flashes, I don't really remember where the original concept sprang from. It's been a while now. I remember I ran the basic concept by Tom and Hades at some point, and I think by Blank as well, with just the weird notion in my head of Rainbow being Celestia's daughter, but I wanted to figure out a reason for that to be a thing. And
Oh yeah, you actually sent that in the...
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it was just an initial concept, just a weird thought, just what if Rainbow Dash was Celestia's daughter? How would that affect things? But of course, I also needed to figure out a reason for that to be the case. You can't just say, well, this is this now. No, you need a catalyst to throw things off course, or it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Either something needs to happen differently or something needs to have changed. I decided to take the route of time changing by exploiting the fact that the season 5 finale was a thing, and it's not really a very different alternate universe, but it is different enough that I do have to keep in the back of my head a lot of moving parts, especially when I was first working on Glimpses way back when. Feels like so long ago, but it's been less than a year.
Well, things are certainly changing a lot more than they were originally in recent times.
Oh, yeah. You see, a big part of it is, especially during the Glimpses and early choices era for the series, a lot of it was, I wanted, when I had Twilight have her dream of her future self at the start of Glimpses, I figured it would probably be wise to have to make sure that someone else knew that time was changing, and that would also be a good way for me to explain in my head why Celestia went out of her way to adopt Rainbow Dash, just some orphaned peasant, pretty much. No offense, Rainbow. She's not real, whatever. But, so really a lot of the thoughts I was going through was trying to connect the dots to make everything that was happening make sense, which was a lot easier said than done, but I like to think I did a decent job with it. And I managed to get the first story was 40 chapters, and a lot of that one was episodic, if you'll recall, broken up into smaller plot arcs and smaller chains of events that kind of lead into each other but aren't directly connected. With Twilight and Rainbow first meeting and agreeing to try and be friends at Celestia's request, and then following various parts of their lives as they're growing up together in Canterlot, and eventually culminating with them getting the elements and learning all about the fact that they're in an alternate universe. I mean, I think that's probably one of the more interesting things about this one, compared to like the others here, is the characters know they're in an alternate timeline. They know this is not how things were originally. They just can't do anything to put it back.
Yeah, I was about to correct you there. You said alternate universe when it's not on a timeline. Same universe, just things are different.
Well, I mean, it's the same basic notion here. It requires the alternate universe tag. That's what I'm talking about. Something fundamental changed in the setting. So, yes. And a lot of it really boiled down to, I guess, really trying to keep in mind what all of the other characters were doing. And keeping it focused on Twilight and Rainbow Dash made sure I didn't have to spread that focus too wide. But there's a big reason why I skipped over a lot of Season 1 after little glimpses, why I pretty much just jumped straight to Season 2. because of a bunch of factors. Not first of which being I didn't want to just copy paste all of that. It's an alternate universe story, but a lot of alternate universe stories fall into the trap of just introducing a new character or a slight alteration, like a character being female or having a different attribute or something, but it's still by and large the same sequence of events, largely unchanged, and that's not very interesting for the reader. Which is why when I tackled it, I skip over the parts that would be more or less the same unless there's something critical. With little glimpses, the big difference in the last 10 chapters between the Season 1 premiere was Rainbow Dash got abducted by Nightmare Moon because of their family relationship at that point, meaning that one of the key members of the group who solved more than a few problems on the way to the castle was missing. So the group had to come up with new solutions to those problems, which also meant I had to explore alternative methods for the characters to understand their element. With Rarity and Generosity, it was bringing cloaks for the rest of the group. With Pinkie Pie, it was more or less the same thing, minus the song. With Applejack, instead of telling Twilight she'll be safe when she falls, it's telling Twilight she might not be safe, but she's not going to tell her a lie that says otherwise, and that they'll do everything they can to help her regardless of the outcome. A more brutal honesty.
Poor Stephen Magnet.
Yeah. Stephen Magnet didn't even show up because they were an hour late to the river and he'd moved on to mope in his own sorrows.
He never got that mustache.
Yep.
Shoot. That reminds me. I have to struggle with that same part you're doing. I got just about every character down except for Pinkie because of the situation I have her in right now that no one else knows about at this point because I'm not there yet. But once I get there, you'll understand how hard it is for me to make her really represent that.
Well,
sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So, now, that all being said, and of course with the Season 2 premiere and the first 10 chapters of Little Choices, the big thing that I changed there may seem kind of inconsequential at first, and that was Discord confronting Rainbow Dash about Starlight. And that whole and that very slight alteration to their interaction, just basically very mildly changing the vision she had that Discord gave her and changing his riddle, his poem, set off pretty much the rest of Little Choices and its sequel. So that's why I skipped over all of Season 1 and only covered what I needed to from Season 2 so I could get back to the fact that this is an alternate reality I'm writing. And then there I had to figure out, okay, why is Starlight not wherever the hell? Why isn't she founding our town, et cetera, et cetera? I had to come up with a lot of stuff in the back of my head, which I haven't even gotten into explaining yet because she wasn't in most of Choices. She only showed up a few times. A main character in Consequences, but still. And as a result, it's...
Answer is her senpai got in contact.
It's an interesting thing with the Little Flashes series because I don't really think a whole lot about it when I'm writing it. I think about it when I'm not sitting at my computer, when I'm doing basically anything else, when I'm in the shower, when I'm taking a walk. I think about things then, but when I'm actually sitting down and writing, I'm just making shit up as I go. Which I find is always the best way for me to go about things. Because it lets the story flow naturally. I have a very vague idea of where I want things to go, but I let it tell itself. And so, for example, with Little Choices, there was a sequence that was originally going to be in there, but because of how things wrote themselves, I wound up writing out an entire chunk of the story, an entire town that was originally going to be in there, but would no longer fit because of how things went. Specifically, with the train incident towards the end, I suppose we should have said this a lot fucking early, but spoiler warning for stories. Whoops.
Oh, yeah.
But
I think if they've watched enough Jibber Jabbers, they'll know by now.
Yes.
You could just annotate a certain minute mark.
Yeah, anyways, carrying on. We're going to go a little over our regular time this day because I kind of want to wrap up this topic up nicely, and it requires I talk for more than one more minute. So, as things stand, so, with the original train incident when Rainbow attacked Starlight, I wasn't originally planning on her getting knocked out in that, but it just kind of wrote itself in. It made sense for Starlight to defend herself, and with the powerhouse that she is, Rainbow Dash, along with her natural negative reactions to magic, wouldn't be able to keep her consciousness for very long, especially being blasted by a blunt concussive blast almost point blank in the face. Rainbow passes out. What I originally had planned, though, was not for that to happen, for Starlight to keep running and for Rainbow to chase her but lose her in the woods, and keep pursuing her even with Twilight and the rest of the gang trying to tell her to stop, eventually leading them to an abandoned town called Salt Lake City, which was abandoned mostly on the grounds that the Salt Lake it was based around wound up actually being toxic, and so their main export was rendered null, and the town just kind of fell off the map as a result. Interesting story behind that I'll get into another time.
I would have thought it was because it's like an actual salt lake, and that's not good for you.
No, it's a salt. It was a lake very heavy in salt contents, and they exported a lot of that salt. But harvesting a lot of that salt disturbed toxic chemicals in the water, making the whole thing poisonous to ingest. So they had to completely cancel all of that, and the whole town basically went tits up.
Yeah, I don't know how the actual Salt Lake City works, so
Neither do I. But anyways, so they've wind up in the town, and that's where Starlight's been hiding, and there's no one else hurt. It's just Starlight and the main six. Rainbow winds up finding Starlight, and once again, blinded by her own rage towards Starlight, her own irrational rage caused by Discord, attacks Starlight inside of a house, a big house, like a warehouse. And in her self-defense, Starlight causes the warehouse to collapse because it's an old thing. It hasn't been maintained. It's rotting. The whole thing crumbles down around Rainbow and her friends. And there was this one moment that I had planned where Rainbow's about to chase Starlight out of the building while it's still crumbling, and Twilight calls out to her because the rest of the group are trapped under a bunch of falling debris, and Rainbow has an opportunity to help them out. Twilight calls out to her. Rainbow turns to look at her. There's this moment where they just kind of look at each other, and then instead of going back to help Twilight and the others, Rainbow goes after Starlight instead, still consumed by her anger and hatred and rage. Essentially leaving Twilight and the others in a crumbling building where they could very easily die. Now they don't, they manage to get out of there, but that was going to lead into later after Starlight finally fully gets away, which was going to culminate with her actually stealing Rainbow's cutie marks, kind of doing that whole thing. Like the notion was she was going to steal Rainbow's cutie mark in a fit of desperation, and she would then decide, if this is what I have to do to keep myself safe from you, then fine. And then she'd leave with Rainbow being powerless to chase her. And then once she gets captured in Canterlot by the changelings, the cutie mark would come flying back. Now, before that, before, of course, the cutie mark would come back, Rainbow, would pass out and wake up later at a camp set up by everyone else, and that would have been when Twilight gave her a harsh scolding about everything that had happened, about leaving them inside of a crumbling building to pursue an innocent with, basically intent to kill. It would have been at that point that their relationship would have been almost irreparably soured, and Rainbow Dash would have started having her enormous guilt trip, basically. In the original version of things, they weren't originally supposed to go back to Ponyville or meet Thorax. That wasn't originally planned. Initially, it was planned so that less than a day after all of that happens, they're still in their campsite, they see the smoke rising from Canterlot, and it's seeing that smoke that causes Rainbow Dash to decide to try and go and try and help the situation however possible, and not in a stealthy way. But as we know, things panned out differently. Rainbow Dash wound up getting knocked out by Starlight and wound up going into her several day-long guilt trip pretty much immediately after, instead of chasing her to a totally different town. So, yeah.
I think it works out for the better, though, because I think Rainbow Dash literally seeing Twilight potentially about to die and then not snapping out of it would be a bit odd.
Well, the point of that would have been to help emphasize just how consumed she was by this anger and fear towards Starlight. And also, in the back of her head, I would have written that she'd rationalize it by that Twilight can take care of herself, they'll be fine.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot worse than just lashing out and actually hitting or smacking Twilight.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I prefer it the way it currently is.
Oh yeah, so do I. I am very happy with how Little Choices turned out. And the fact that I let it flow naturally is a big part of that, I think. It's just kind of the way I write, and that's how I've pretty much approached all of the Little Flashes series, is I have a loose idea of where I want things to go, but if it winds up going a different direction, so be it. I wasn't originally intending for there to be a Twidash relationship, but that just kind of cropped up.
You know how in mine, ever since the original change, for all future stories, I kind of plan out chapter by chapter, so I know what I'm doing and what I'm going to do with each one.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Yeah, I do, but something still sometimes change because, once again, spoilers. DM Conter, I think that was the chapter name where Daybreaker killed Immortalis, killed quote unquote.
Yeah, blew up her physical
Originally,
body.
that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Originally, that wasn't to happen. In the original one, Immortalis kicked their asses. Yeah, and Cadence came to save them because they were fucked. But like that kind of changed too. Actually, they were the ones that won, but
Sort of.
Immortalis cheated. So yeah.
Yep. Anyways,
In my story, like, oh, never mind. Guess we're cutting off.
no, go ahead, finish your thought, then we'll end off.
Yeah.
Human Nature Thorn wasn't even supposed to be a character. He kind of appeared. Like, very much just appeared out of nowhere. It wasn't supposed to. It was supposed to be like just a random attack of timber wolves. Next thing you know, hey, check out this alpha wolf that came to life out of nowhere.
I mean, for what it's worth, I think you got a really intimidating antagonist on your hands with that guy. But
Maybe
on
next
that
man.
note, along that note, it is time for us to end this episode of Jibber Jabber. Thank you all very much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed. And as always, keep your ears open, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Photos.
Ta-ra.